right, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the virtual public meeting for the Union County Critical Intersection Program. Phase 2 of this program includes 5 intersections. We've been hosting separate meetings for each intersection, and tonight's meeting will focus on the Waxhaw-Marvin Road, Bonds Grove Church Road intersection in the village of Marvin. We're going to start with a brief presentation that'll take about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for a question and answer session. And before we jump in, I just want to take a minute to introduce the panelists that we have for tonight's meeting. My name's Jenny Newcester with RS&H, and I'm a senior planner on the consulting team that's helping the county with this project. And next we have Bjorn Hansen with Union County.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this meeting. I'm a transportation planner and senior planner for long range planning with Union County, and the critical intersection program is something we've been working on for several years with the municipalities and the NCDOT, and we're glad we get to present this potential project to you for feedback.
And next we'll go to Rohit with the Village of Marvin.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rohit Amanmunchi. I'm the planner for the Village of Marvin. You know, this project's been a long time coming, so I'm really glad that we're here and glad that everyone has joined tonight.
Thank you. And next we have Theo with the town of Waxhaw.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Theo Gutea, staff engineer with the town of Waxhaw. My role in this project is to coordinate with Marvin. We want to make sure that we're aware of what's going on at this intersection, since it is the gateway to Waxhaw and to Marvin. So just making sure we're staying in the loop and answer any questions where needed. Thank you.
And next we have Stuart with NCDOT.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the Senior Division Planning Engineer for NCDOT's Division 10 office in Albemarle. Because many of these improvements are located along NCDOT roadways, NCDOT has been heavily involved in this process, analyzing these intersections and selecting which ones will advance.
And we also have Travis with NCDOT.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. This is Travis Pressler with NCDOT. I am the district engineer for Union and Anson County, and in my office, we do a lot of permitting for driveway and access and encroachment review. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Alison Drake with RS&H.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alison Drake with RS&H. I'm a roadway engineer, and I am also the project manager from the consulting team for this project.
Thank you. And now I just want to walk through a couple of the logistics for tonight's webinar. Alison, if you could go to the next slide, please. The meeting attendees won't be able to share their video or audio, so if you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, please type them in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. You can type your questions at any point during the meeting, and we'll answer them when we get to the Q&A portion after the presentation. We're also recording tonight's meeting, and we'll be posting that on the project website for anyone that wasn't able to attend the meeting tonight. And lastly, I'll just remind our panelists to please keep their microphones muted when they aren't speaking so we can minimize any background noise. Next slide, please. Here's an overview of the presentation for tonight. We'll start with some background information on the critical intersection program. We'll show you the intersections that are included in phase 2 and talk about the steps in the study process. Then we'll switch over to the online website for the Waxhaw-Marvin Road, Bonds Grove Church Road intersection, and we'll talk about the specific design concepts being considered for that intersection and the next steps. And then after the presentation, we'll begin the Q&A session. And just a reminder that you can type your question at any time during the presentation, and we'll get to those at the end. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bjorn, who will tell us a little bit more about the critical intersection program.
Sure. Thank you, Jenny. So this is a program that's been in existence in Union County since 2014, when we identified the need to focus our efforts. Union County is a large place, so over 600 square miles, a lot of transportation needs, but limited resources compared to those needs. So we needed to focus on projects that, one, were competitive for getting funding, and two, were consistent with DOT and municipal efforts. So we received a grant from the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization to evaluate intersections throughout the county. In 2016, we evaluated 54, with 15 finalized for design work and emphasis for funding. And we received funding for almost 2/3 of those intersections in the next few years. And because of that successful work, we realized by 2019, we needed to update our list of intersections so that we could continue to compete for grants. So that process was conducted in 2019. We identified an additional 15 intersections, and this one, Bonds Grove and Waxhaw-Marvin, was one of those locations. But as a part of that selection work, we didn't do any design analysis. We needed to hire consultants to assist us with that. So the process was to go back to the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization to request funding to do some design work and cost estimation for each of these locations so that we could develop a design that was agreed upon by the locals and by the public and by the NCDOT as feasible and effective, and then develop the cost estimates so that we could go and apply for funds and lower our risk of finding out that what we had proposed was woefully inadequate in terms of the amount of money that was available, or the design just wasn't the right one for addressing the issue. And so we completed that work on 6 intersections last year. We received a second grant to work on the next 5 intersections. That is the process we're in now. We expect that work to be complete by June, so just 3 months from now. Next slide. Last year, we worked on the intersections in gray. 2 of them were in Waxhaw, 1 in Weddington, and then 3 in the more northern and eastern parts of the county. We actually received funding for 2 of those intersections for improvements in the past year. So we have been successful in moving those along. The next 5 are in navy blue, and the one here that we're at is Bonds Grove Church and Waxhaw-Marvin. We're in the 4th of the 5th community meetings that we've been holding as a part of this comment period that will end next week. After this work is done, we will evaluate the feedback and move forward with recommendations that will then go to the municipal and county governing boards for a decision in terms of which design they support. Next slide, please. So that's the background process that got us to where we are today. And we hired RS&H to assist us with the actual analysis, design alternatives, and cost estimation process that we're going to present to you tonight for feedback. And so I will now turn it over to Alison for additional information.
Thank you, Bjorn. So as Bjorn said, in studying these intersections, Union County and its municipalities formed an advisory committee, which includes the village of Marvin, as well as the town of Waxhaw. So based on the data gathered and the analysis results, 2 alternatives were developed for each intersection. We're now in the public involvement stage where we are engaging the public for feedback through virtual meetings as well as the online survey. These results will be used to select a preferred alternative for each intersection. Cost estimates and recommendations will then be compiled into a final report, which will be used to give Marvin, Waxhaw, and other municipalities a leg up to compete for funding for these projects. The final report will be posted on the Union County website upon completion if you'd like to view that. So we will now show the website that is publicly available to discuss the intersection in more detail. So Bonds Grove Church Road and Waxhaw-Marvin Road intersection is located in Marvin and is currently a 3-legged intersection with a stop sign on the westbound Waxhaw-Marvin Road approach only. The intersection, as you can see, is in a sharp horizontal curve, which limits sight distance for vehicles traveling through the intersection. There are also 3 schools located just west of the intersection. Review of the traffic in this location shows that Waxhaw-Marvin continuing onto Waxhaw-Marvin actually has the heavier vehicle movement than the existing through movement where Waxhaw-Marvin continues onto Bonds Grove Church Road. So this is a reflection of the connection this road provides from Waxhaw to Marvin, but also to the Ballantyne area. So 2 alternatives were developed. Alternative 1, as you can see, is a signalized intersection, and alternative 2 is a roundabout. So alternative 1 replaces the stop controlled intersection with a signalized intersection. Waxhaw-Marvin Road would be realigned to become the through movement to better accommodate the heaviest traffic demands. Bonds Grove Church Road would be realigned to T into Waxhaw-Marvin Road and approve the approach angle and sight distance. A left turn lane would be added on Bonds Grove Church Road, as well as the western leg of Waxhaw-Marvin. Also, as you can see, a multi-use path would be added along Waxhaw-Marvin, and this is part of future greenway plans for this corridor. So this alternative allows full access to remain to all the properties surrounding the intersection. However, right-of-way acquisition would be required. NCDOT has a standard process for this right-of-way acquisition, but it's not happening at this time as this project is not yet funded. So this alternative potentially reduces crashes by 27% and reduces peak hour vehicle delays, which are traffic delays during the busiest hour of the day, by 88%. The approximate cost of this alternative is $2,940,000. So included in that cost is construction, right-of-way, engineering and design, and construction inspection. The cost is in 2020 dollars, which means that it could go up with inflation before the project is actually funded. However, since we're really early in the design process, there's a lot of contingencies that go into that cost. So this actually could reduce the cost when the project is actually constructed. Alternative 2 addresses safety and traffic delays with a roundabout. A left turn lane would be added on the western leg of Waxhaw-Marvin Road, and a right turn lane would be added on Bonds Grove Church Road. Both Waxhaw-Marvin and Bonds Grove Church Road are realigned to approve the intersection approach angles and the sight distance. A multi-use path would also be included along Waxhaw-Marvin, similar to what we saw in Alternative 1. Access to all the properties surrounding the intersection would be maintained. However, this alternative, similar to Alternative 1, would require some right-of-way acquisition. So this alternative potentially reduces crashes by 50% and peak hour vehicle delays by 92%. The approximate cost of this alternative is $5,140,000. So if you want to come back to review this information later on the website, you can click on these information circles as shown here. And there's also a survey at the bottom of the page where you're able to provide your feedback up until April 2nd. The next step for the critical intersection analysis project is to evaluate the feedback received from the public involvement and select a preferred alternative for each intersection. The design concepts will then be finalized and presented to their corresponding municipal boards, so in this case, Marvin, for approval. Finally, a study workbook and action plan will be completed for all the intersections, and as I stated before, that will be available on the Union County website. So with the information provided by the workbook, the village and the county can consider potential funding sources and apply for funding. So I'll now pass it back to Jenny to conduct the Q&A part of this meeting.
All right, thank you, Allison. Again, I'll just remind everyone that you can submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. You can also search online for the Union County Critical Intersection Program, and you can find a link to the project website to review the information that Allison was just walking through, as well as information for any of the other 4 intersections. So we would encourage you to go online and review that information and complete the survey there to let us know which alternative you prefer. And again, that comment period is open through April 2nd. And you can also submit any questions or comments. There's an open survey box at the bottom where you can provide any open-ended questions or comments. So if you think of any questions after tonight's meeting, please feel free to go on there and submit those through the website. I will say that we've gotten a lot of responses to the online survey so far. I think over 350 people have gone online so far to provide their feedback. So that's been a great response. We also have Bjorn's contact information shown on the screen, so you can feel free to reach out to him with any questions about this intersection or the critical intersection program. And of course, Rohit and Theo are also available with the village of Marvin and town of Waxhaw for any questions. So at this time, I'm also going to go ahead and open a poll within our webinar. So if you'd like to provide your feedback on a preferred alternative during this meeting, you can do that as well. And I'll just leave that up through the end of our Q&A session. And let's see, I'm not seeing many questions coming through the box right now, so we can go ahead and start with just a couple of more general questions. Bjorn, you might just want to talk a little bit more about intersections that weren't included in this round of the critical intersection program, and kind of how these were selected and why others aren't included.
Sure, thank you. This program uses very limited funds. The fact that Union County puts any money on roads is kind of an anomaly because, like most counties, I think probably all counties in North Carolina, we don't own any roads, but we have a role to play in providing some sort of feedback to the NCDOT in coordination with the municipalities in terms of what intersections we want to focus our efforts on. And as a part of the selection process 2 years ago, we looked at locations that weren't likely to get torn up as a part of a larger road widening project, because even though these look like relatively simple projects, and when the roundabouts are built, they often are built in 8 to 12 weeks, but those 8 to 12 weeks required several years of work ahead of time. And so I'm thinking of Providence Road in particular, where there are congested intersections with a lot of traffic. But if we were to start today on a project there, it would probably get complete just as construction starts on the NC-16 widening. So the improvements would get torn up. So that's why you don't see recommended projects on Providence Road or NC-84 leading to Wesley Chapel, because those are both corridors that are funded for improvements. Same is true for Monroe Road going through Stallings and much of Indian Trail. So those are some of the considerations in why certain corridors don't have recommended projects on them. For the projects that were selected, we looked for a combination of crash history as well as congestion and feasibility that improvements could be made. If the project was really, if the corridor is really constrained or had already been improved to multi-lanes, the amount of upgrades we could make were probably limited, especially considering how much money we have available to spend. So those are some of the considerations, and it certainly doesn't mean that Marvin or Waxhaw couldn't focus on other intersections. Each individual municipality has their own priorities, and hopefully we can focus on intersections that are mutually agreed upon, but both municipalities could choose to emphasize other intersections as they try and go for grant dollars to implement those improvements.
Thank you, Bjorn. And while we're waiting for any questions to come in, maybe it'd be good to hear a little bit more about, maybe from Stuart, a little bit about how the life cycle of a project would go, if these projects are picked up for funding, kind of what we could expect in terms of the process and when they may go to construction.
Sure, Jenny, I'll be glad to speak about that. Funding for these projects, these types of projects, can come from a variety of different sources, and it's not uncommon for us to assemble funding from 2 or more sources in order to fully fund one of these small intersection improvement projects. Each of those funding sources comes with their own constraints and requirements, as well as their own timelines, and that sometimes makes it difficult to effectively deliver these projects in a timely manner and have the funding line up. With respect to life cycle of a project, generally once a project is funded, people often ask, why does it take so long to get a project implemented and get it on the ground to construction? And what often happens is once a project is funded, it's moved into our division design construct workflow. And at NCDOT, with small intersection projects, we typically design and construct those using our in-house teams and design personnel that we have in our division offices. The division design construct unit generally has a backlog of 12 to 18 months. So it often takes that long to get a project into their workflow and get it to a point where they can begin working on it. Generally, it takes about a year to design a small intersection project and put a set of plans together, specifications, and have it ready to go to bid. Once the plans are complete, the right-of-way acquisition phase begins. That can take anywhere from 6 to 12 months, depending on the type of acquisition that's required and the number of parcels that need to be acquired. Once the right-of-way phase is complete, the project then advances into the bid phase, which generally takes a few months to prepare plans and specifications, advertise the project, request bids, get those bids, receive those bids, and open them and determine if we have a successful bid package from a contractor. The next step is to advance into construction phase and relocate utilities. And utility relocations generally can take anywhere from 6 months to a year for a small intersection project. As with most intersections, there are generally a number of utility providers in and around the intersection areas, and it takes some amount of time to coordinate with all those utility providers and get those utilities moved out of the way in order to widen the intersection. The actual construction period itself, as I said, it can generally take 6 to 12 months once the utility is relocated. So when you add up all the time required for both the funding, the design process, right away, utility relocation, then finally the actual construction, it can sometimes take anywhere from 2 to 4 years in order to get a project from the initial planning stage and concept, pretty much where we are now, up to a completed project that's on the ground and actually open to traffic.
Great. Thank you, Stuart. And we have had a couple of questions come in on the question and answer box. One from the current owners of the property that'll be most affected, the land with the horse pasture there on the corner of the intersection. They just completed their 15th fence rebuild on the project due to an automobile accident. So they're asking if the speed limits could be adjusted in conjunction with this project, and if it might be possible to enact those lower speed limits now rather than wait. So Stuart, I think the speed limit question might be a good one for you. Oh.
Excuse me, take myself off mute. Apologize for that. The adjustment of speed limit is a question that we get pretty often. In this case, with the introduction of a signalized intersection or roundabout, it may actually effectively fix itself. Roundabouts generally have a lower circulating speed, somewhere in the area of 20 to 25 miles per hour generally. And the approach speeds people are slowing approaching the intersection. So the speed issue may actually correct itself. In the event that it doesn't, you can contact our Division 10 traffic engineer at our Division 10 office in Albemarle and request a analysis of speed limit and adjustment of speed limit. We will do a speed study and look at what the average travel speeds are in that area, look at the crash rates, and make a determination on whether or not we feel that adjusting the speed limit will have any effect on travel speeds, and if it's a valid decision to adjust that travel speed.
Great, thank you, Stuart. And there was a follow-up question that they had also planned to eventually sell that land for residential purposes. So there's a question whether the land would be rezoned as a result of this project. So Rohit, that may be a good question for you.
Sure. This project doesn't involve any rezoning, and looking at our future land use map, that is slated for residential, just like the rest of Marvin, where our typical 1 unit per acre zoning, which we don't really have any plans to change that.
Great, thank you. It looks like from the poll that we have open so far, the 3 votes that we have in so far, all for the roundabout alternative, and that's pretty well in line with the survey responses that have been coming through on the website. I think we mentioned that we had a little over 350 responses to the online survey, and about 80% of those are preferring the roundabout option, and about 17% for the signalized intersection. So just wanted to give an update on the other feedback that we've been receiving so far. And I don't know, Rohit, if there's anything else that you wanted to say about the project or the area, or anything else related to what's going on in the village.
Sure, a couple of things. So our council, as I told you guys in a staff meeting, that our council supported the roundabout alternative as well. And we, in the same meeting, we also discussed the speed limit, and the council member who lives on Waxhaw-Marvin Road said that the 45 miles is probably apt for that road. It's the people that are going 80 miles an hour that are the problem. And as it was mentioned, the roundabout would solve that problem, as we see up in our roundabouts here at Newtown Road, that people slow their descent to meet the needs of traversing that roundabout.
And I know you'll also be presenting the results of this study to the town board, I think coming up maybe in a May meeting, or I'm not sure if you've decided which meeting that'll go to yet.
Yeah, May seems reasonable if that's when you'll have the results in. Keep in touch.
That's right.
And I want to emphasize that this is something that is hopefully better than maybe some other planning efforts that have occurred in the past where recommendations get made and then you go for implementation, you realize there's some sort of conflict or fatal flaw that's going to keep it from happening. Any recommendations that go before the Marvin Village Council or Union County Board of Commissioners or Waxhaw Town Council that come from this process are going to also be vetted by the NCDOT to make sure there aren't any obvious fatal flaws in proposing this as a solution to the issue here. But each of the governing boards really have three choices. They could choose the roundabout, they could choose the teed up intersection, or they could choose neither. That is certainly an option to say, we don't think that either of these are worth the effort compared to the benefit. And that's certainly an option. I don't think that'll happen at this location, but it's certainly an option. So, when these go to our respective governing boards for a decision, I certainly hope that the public weighs in, either contacts your elected officials and let them know how you feel, or attend the meetings in person or virtual, however they're being held in your community, and provide your input. I think, Jenny, we have a couple of questions.
Yes, we've gotten a couple more in. There's one, how will a roundabout affect egress on the surrounding properties? Alison, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Sure, yes. So there will be all the same access points for driveways, etc., for the roundabout that are there now. So there wouldn't be any properties losing any of their current driveways. As you can see on this roundabout alternative, we are realigning this driveway slightly. That's just because the road is being realigned, so we need to retie the driveways in. But all access would remain as is today for the surrounding properties.
If I may add to clarify, this is the property owner. He owns not only the wedge shaped property that is immediately at this intersection, but he also owns the properties.
This one?
No, not that one. If you were to, are you able to click the minus button and zoom out? Yes, he owns the four basically properties, the 3 on Waxhaw-Marvin Road and 1 on Bonds Grove Church the other way. And if you were to do a subdivision, that would basically be one house per each of those lots. What would be the outlook on driveway access for all of those undeveloped properties?
Yeah, I think those driveways, and DOT, feel free to jump in here if you disagree, but they're all a good distance from the roundabout. Typically in a design, you don't want to have the driveways too close, as that could be unsafe for drivers. Potential accidents could happen from something like that. So, but in looking at this, all those properties have a pretty good distance from the roundabout, probably with the exception of the one right on the corner. However, with how far that property reaches, if there was a home to go there per se, there would be some pretty far access points to be farther away from the roundabout.
Hey, Rohit, this is Travis Pressler with NCDOT, and I would want to comment that as a redevelopment with multiple houses being proposed, if that does end up happening, we would typically encourage a single access to multiple homes, especially in a case like this where you have high traffic volumes. So, but the access itself, there looks like like she said, it was there's lots of opportunity for access because there's plenty of space between the end of the property line and the roundabout itself.
Mhm.
And so I was going to say there's also a follow-up question about the substantial underground infrastructure at that site, including the sewer lines. So are there any criteria that would cause further study or adjustments to the project? I know, Allison, we took a look at the utilities out there, so I don't know if you want to start on that one.
Yes, so, and I know Stuart spoke to utility coordination during kind of that discussion about the life cycle of a project. So as this would move into final design, we would get updated utility information and survey to see exactly what's out there in terms of the utilities. And we would evaluate that with the design to make sure that we're thinking about what's the most cost effective. You don't want to just impact all the utilities and then it be very expensive. So there's a chance that it could tweak the design some based off of where those utility relocations would need to be. But Stuart or Travis, feel free to add to that.
I think that captures it accurately. We have recently completed design on another roundabout project in the Marvin area, and it has similar challenges with the sewer line as well. So that's not uncommon to encounter those sorts of challenges with utilities. And in those cases, we look at whether or not from a cost standpoint and a practical standpoint, it makes more sense to relocate the utility or to try to shift the roundabout away from that particular utility so that it doesn't impact it as severely.
I wanted to see, Theo, is there anything that you'd like to add from Waxhaw's perspective in terms of this intersection or any other plans that you guys have in this area?
Yeah, so when reviewing this, we just wanted to make sure that we provided input at this location about a Waxhaw-Marvin road corridor study that the town completed a couple years ago. That study was also funded through a grant. The limits of that study run from Bonds Grove and Waxhaw-Marvin Road down to Helms Road. And our study shows that on the western portion of the road is a 10-foot multi-use path. So we want to make sure that whichever design is selected, that it lines up with that. And even if there are changes as the design phase goes through, that we can adjust where needed for our long-term planning efforts when it comes to greenways and sidewalks. The collaborative process will ensure a better result at the end. And any feedback related to greenways and sidewalks can be provided as well.
That reminds me of something. At the meeting, I showed the council this website. They had a pretty strong opposition against the greenway on the north of this intersection on Waxhaw-Marvin Road. They said they would rather see the whole thing shifted north if the topo was the constraint from putting it on the south. Because as Theo said, the vision for this corridor is to have that greenway run along the entire, at this intersection, it's kind of south, but the west side of this corridor. Just conveying something to you. I know that may be too big of an ask, but that's what they said.
Just to clarify, so looking at this photo, that's the bottom part of the screen. Okay.
Yeah, that's where they would prefer to see that trail as it was in the first iteration.
And Theo, we've had another question come in that I believe it's related to that corridor study that you were mentioning, saying that Waxhaw-Marvin Road has become a major shortcut for South Carolinians to travel to the Ballantyne area. And was this increase in traffic factored into that study?
Yeah, so that study not only focused on the pedestrian and cyclist aspect of it, also focused on the vehicular traffic as well. The recommended proposed cross-section out of that study is a 3-lane cross-section where each subdivision has its own turn lane so that through traffic doesn't have to stop for vehicles turning right into subdivisions or vehicles turning left where turn lanes don't exist. So that is how traffic will be addressed along this corridor. And also that study recommended a signal at Great Byram Road as a recommendation of that study. And part of that study also recommends a phase 2 improvements to the Kensington Drive and Waxhaw-Marvin Road that adds more turn lanes as well when traffic is needed, or whenever traffic warrants that those turn lanes are needed at Kensington.
Something I would want to note about the cut through traffic and the design of this location is that the traffic counts that are collected annually by the NCDOT are just that, they're cars. I mean, the cars could come from North Carolina, South Carolina. There's certainly cut through traffic from both sides where people are sneaking over Newtown Road to get onto 521 and not go through Marvin, or potentially down some other secondary roads to get to 521 to go shopping. Conversely, people from South Carolina could cut through here to get to other areas in North Carolina. And we coordinate regularly back and forth across the state line on issues like this. And then the second question about the Providence Road widening project, which again is the idea of traffic being kind of fluid and choosing the path of least resistance. Depending on how that widening goes and how much it really affects traffic flow, you could see more traffic on here in the construction phase. And then when construction's complete, you could see traffic shifting off of here because Providence Road is now so much more convenient. It's a equilibrium and traffic's going to do what it's going to do.
And I believe, Bjorn, in the Providence Road widening, and Travis, I believe you could probably speak to this too, but there is a signal that's going to be proposed at Bonds Grove Church Road and Providence. So that would also affect traffic. As I know that left turn movement now, traveling on Bonds Grove to turn onto 16 is a pretty hard move right now.
Yes, Allison, that's correct. All the intersections that we studied up through the 16 corridor, the Providence Road corridor, were we took counts, we projected traffic out, and we designed those intersections to accommodate the future traffic demand and its turns, its various turns, and predicted movement. And we designed them to have an acceptable level of service in our design year 2040. So.
You know the schedule for that widening, Travis?
I don't right offhand. Stuart, do you have that in your memory bank real quick?
Yes, it's scheduled for right-of-way acquisition to begin in 2024 and construction in 2027.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question about the light at Gray Byram Road and whether that would be operational prior to this project. I'm not sure if you have a schedule for that signal at Great Byram or Stuart.
Yes, actually that signal is scheduled to be installed later this summer.
Okay. And there's a question about how Marvin Ridge High School traffic would be rerouted. And I guess that has to do with whether we would be able to maintain traffic on site or whether there would be an off-site detour during construction. Alison, I don't know if you want to start on that one.
Yeah, so those are the two options for construction. Jenny, as you stated, of course, the benefit of closing this intersection would be a faster construction time. Maintaining traffic certainly can be more convenient, but does take longer for construction. So that would be something that will be evaluated as this project moves into final design. And as part of that decision, one thing that will be evaluated are the detour routes, and that will be coordinated with the schools being close by. I know Division 10 usually reaches out to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools and runs those detour routes by them to make sure that's okay, but also think about things about maybe having a summer construction time as to not have as great of an impact on the school traffic.
And then while you have that roundabout image up, Alison, can you talk a little bit about how the roundabout would affect 18-wheeler traffic?
Yes, so NCDOT, including Division 10, does require that roundabouts are built to allow vehicles, 18-wheelers, to travel through with a 53-foot trailer bed. So that's a pretty large 18-wheeler, certainly larger than probably most of the ones coming through here. Bigger than like a rooms to go truck, for example, wouldn't even have a trailer bed that big. So the roundabout will be big enough to accommodate that. As you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit here. And you've probably seen this in other roundabouts throughout the county, but this truck apron in the center here is meant for just that. It allows trucks to mount on that to allow them to better make those movements through the roundabout.
Thank you, Alison. And Bjorn, this is maybe a question for you. This next one that came in about the roundabout on Poplin and Unionville Indian Trail Road. I think they saw it on the location map that we had up earlier in the presentation, and how they can get information on that project or meeting as well.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if I understand the statement, but yes, there's a community meeting coming up for that one as well. Poplin and Unionville Indian Trail on the east side of the county. And the mailings went out to property owners within a certain radius of the intersection locations. At that location, it was probably in excess of 200 that were mailed to. It's probably a similar number for this one as well. But in terms of invitation, literally anyone can attend these. The links for clicking into the meeting are on the project website, and you can click on any one of them. And after the meetings are done, you can click on the YouTube video that will be recorded or that has been recorded and will be posted for people to review after the meeting has occurred.
And yeah, Bjorn, to add to that, as you said, they're on each individual page at the very top here. But also on the main page that gives an overview of all the intersections. There's also a place to join every meeting on those as well. So two different locations there that you can click, and that one at Poplin and Unionville Indian Trail is on Monday at 5:30.
That's right.
If you have any trouble finding any of the links, please feel free to reach out. I think we had Bjorn's contact information up earlier, or if you just Google Union County Critical Intersection Program, you should be able to find this website and find these links.
And Terry's follow-up question, thanking us for the effort. I don't want to take too much credit here because we haven't delivered anything yet. Hopefully in a couple months, all we'll have is a design and a cost estimate. Then we have to go get the money, and then the project has to get delivered. So, I mean, optimistically, you're talking 4 or 5 years potentially. But every day you wait is a day later that the project could get delivered. So, we are trying to give perspective on the process and allowing community feedback and then and input, and then moving forward as quickly as possible, understanding that it's a team effort, and we all want to do the best for the community, balancing a lot of positives and negatives that occur with any of these projects.
All right, and with that, I think we've been through all the questions in the Q&A box that we had so far. So I appreciate everyone's attention and all the good questions that we've gotten. And I'll just open it up for any of the panelists if you have any closing words or final thoughts. And we'll give it a couple more minutes as we go through those to see if anything else comes in, but I'll open it up for a minute.
I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come out this evening. This is a cooperative effort. The municipalities, the county, the DOT, we all play a role, and we are working together to the best of our abilities. But I think you've seen that this is a complex process that we go through, and it requires a lot of patience and persistence to deliver a project. And we're trying to be good stewards of your money in doing so, making sure we choose the best ones and that the designs that are chosen are effective and deliver benefits in a long-term perspective. Oh, we got one on Marvin and Newtown, another funded project that hopefully will get delivered in the relative near future. If Stuart or Travis could weigh in on that one.
I believe that's scheduled for construction in 2022. We're working through some right-of-way issues with that project right now.
That is certainly a needed one.
Yes.
All right, well, I'm not seeing many more questions coming through on the chat box, so certainly encourage everyone to let their friends and neighbors know about the online survey. And again, we appreciate the great response that we've gotten for this intersection so far. And that comment period will remain open through April 2nd. And then we'll be presenting the recommendations to the town boards, and then we'll be producing a final report. And as Alison mentioned earlier, that final report will be available for review on the project website, probably sometime around the June timeframe. So I don't know, I'll give Theo or Rohit one last chance if you have any final words you'd like to say before we close out tonight.
Just wanted to say thank everyone for being here. Thanks for all the great questions, and love to see this project move forward just as anyone else.
Thanks everybody for coming out. I would just like to say on behalf of the town of Waxhaw that we'll support the village of Marvin in whichever alternative they would like to move forward with, and appreciate them keeping us in the loop. Thank you.
Right, and with that, I'll thank everyone for their attendance tonight. And again, this recording will be posted on the website within the next couple of days. And everyone have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.